Imagine standing on a wooden pier. The salty breeze of the Adriatic brushes your face, gondolas sway gently beneath you, and sunlight dances across the marble facades of palaces that seem to float above the turquoise waters. Venice, La Serenissima, the most serene republic, is unlike any other city on Earth. But here lies a question that has puzzled historians for centuries. Why would anyone build a city on water? To understand, we must travel back to the 5th century AD. The Western Roman Empire was collapsing. Italy, once the beating heart of civilization, had become a land of chaos and fear. From the north came invaders, the Huns, the Goths, and later the Lombards. Cities were plundered, villages burned, and entire populations fled in terror. Families from ancient towns like Padua, Altinum, and Aquileia had no choice but to abandon their homes. They searched for safety where no armies dared to go, into the shallow lagoons of the Adriatic Sea. It was a desperate gamble. The land here was unstable, nothing but mudflats, shifting sandbanks, and saltwater channels. There were no fields to farm, no roads to travel, no stone walls for protection. But the lagoon had one priceless advantage: horses and armies could not follow. Raiders on horseback were useless in these flooded plains. For the first time, the refugees could breathe. Still, survival was far from easy. The early settlers faced hunger, disease, and constant flooding. Their feet sank into wet sand, their homes rotted from the salt air, and fresh water was scarce. Yet slowly, they adapted. They became masters of the lagoon. They learned to fish, to trap eels, and to harvest salt, turning the lagoon's limitations into resources. And then came the greatest challenge: how to build where there was no solid ground. The solution was as ingenious as it was unlikely. The settlers began driving millions of wooden piles deep into the muddy seabed, stacking them tightly together until they formed artificial islands strong enough to hold wooden homes. Over centuries, these primitive foundations evolved into the marble city we know today. From chaos and desperation, a miracle was born. A city that would one day control the seas and trade of the entire Mediterranean. The first Venetians had escaped war and death, but they had unknowingly chosen one of the most hostile landscapes imaginable. The Venetian lagoon was no paradise. It was a maze of shifting sandbanks, tides, and brackish water. There was no firm land, no rock to anchor foundations. And yet, somehow, they would create a city so enduring that it still stands 1,500 years later. The secret begins beneath the water. To build anything on this unstable ground, the Venetians developed a radical solution. They created land where there was none. Thousands, then millions of wooden piles, each cut from the oak and alder forests of distant northern Italy and the Balkans, were shipped into the lagoon. Each pile was driven deep into the soft mud until it hit a harder layer of compressed clay beneath. Over centuries, these waterlogged logs did not rot as one might expect. Instead, deprived of oxygen, they petrified into a stone-like state, forming a base so solid that entire marble palaces could rise upon it. But the ground was only the beginning. The Venetians tamed the waters themselves. Through an intricate system of canals, barriers, and tidal controls, they transformed an unpredictable lagoon into a network of water highways. Imagine standing on a wooden platform in the 9th century, watching workers knee-deep in mud, hammering piles beneath the future Piazza San Marco. Gondoliers, not yet the sleek figures of romance we know today, ferried stones, timbers, and tools across shifting channels. Every block of Istrian limestone that now lines Venice's foundations was brought from distant quarries by boat, carefully placed to resist salt corrosion. Then came the bridges. At first, they were nothing more than planks of wood, but as the city grew, stone replaced timber. Each bridge became a marvel of balance and strength, connecting hundreds of tiny islands into a single living organism. By the 12th century, Venice had transformed from a fragile refugee settlement into one of the most advanced engineering feats in medieval Europe. Its streets flowed with water, its palaces glittered above the tides, and its canals carried not just fishermen, but ambassadors, merchants, and kings. What had begun as survival had become ambition. The Venetians were no longer hiding in the lagoon. They were building an empire upon the sea. By the 12th century, Venice was no longer just a city. It had become an idea, a living dream of wealth and power rising from the sea. While other kingdoms fought over land, Venice built an empire of water. Its ships sailed further than anyone dared to dream, and its merchants brought back treasures the world had never seen. The secret to Venice's power lay in trade. Positioned at the heart of the Mediterranean, between east and west, the city became the gateway of Europe. Spices from India, silk from China, glass from Syria, and gold from Africa, everything passed through the lagoon. On the Grand Canal, gondolas and merchant ships created a living river of wealth. The city itself glittered like a jewel. The Piazza San Marco became a stage for power, lined with Byzantine-inspired palaces, golden mosaics, and marble colonnades. St. Mark's Basilica, with its shining domes, housed relics brought from across the known world, some by trade, others by conquest. But Venice's dominance wasn't only economic. It wielded military power through its invincible navy. The Arsenale di Venezia, the city's legendary shipyard, could produce an entire galley in a single day, an industrial miracle centuries ahead of its time. Thousands of workers hammered, forged, and crafted the vessels that would rule the Mediterranean. Yet, power always comes at a cost. The Fourth Crusade, 1202 to 1204, revealed Venice's true ambitions. Instead of liberating the Holy Land, Venetian fleets diverted the crusade to Constantinople, plundering the greatest city of the East. Priceless relics, statues, and treasures poured into Venice, making it richer and feared across Europe. Behind the glitter, Venice was also a city of shadows. In the quiet corners of its labyrinthine streets, political intrigue thrived. The Council of Ten, a secretive governing body, ruled with an iron hand, ensuring loyalty while silencing dissent. Murmured betrayals were whispered behind closed doors, and gondolas gliding under moonlight sometimes carried spies instead of lovers. By the 14th century, Venice was at its peak, a maritime superpower, a center of art and innovation, and a place where East met West in a dazzling dance of cultures. Its merchants shaped the fate of kingdoms. Its gold funded empires. Its influence reached far beyond the Adriatic, into every corner of the known world. But even as the Queen of the Adriatic reigned supreme, storm clouds were gathering. Enemies plotted in secret, rival powers rose, and the balance Venice had so carefully maintained would soon begin to crumble. By the mid-15th century, the shimmering jewel of the Adriatic had begun to lose its glow. For centuries, Venice had ruled the seas, growing rich on trade between East and West. But now, new powers were rising, and with them came storms that even the great Venetian navy could not weather. The first blow came from the Ottoman Empire. As Venice expanded along the Dalmatian coast and deeper into the eastern Mediterranean, it found itself staring into the eyes of a new giant. The Ottomans, led by ambitious sultans, were carving out an empire that swallowed ancient cities whole. In 1453, Constantinople fell, the fabled gateway between Europe and Asia. Venice's most vital trading partner was now under Ottoman control. Overnight, Venetian merchants were forced to pay exorbitant taxes to access the markets of the East. Profits shrank. Rivals, emboldened by Venetian weakness, circled like vultures. But the Ottomans were not Venice's only enemy. Far to the west, the world itself was changing. In 1498, Vasco da Gama reached India by sailing around Africa, opening a new ocean route that bypassed the Mediterranean entirely. The treasures of the East, once Venice's lifeblood, now flowed into Lisbon and Seville instead of the Venetian lagoon. Desperation pushed Venice into war. Throughout the 15th and 16th centuries, the Republic fought 5 major wars against the Ottomans, losing precious islands, colonies, and shipping routes. The once invincible Venetian fleet was stretched thin, and even its legendary arsenale struggled to keep pace. Inside the city, power shifted into the shadows. The Council of Ten, once the guardian of stability, became obsessed with secrecy and control. Spies haunted every bridge, whispers filled the alleys, and political trials were carried out under flickering torchlight. The same walls that once echoed with laughter now carried the weight of fear. Still, Venice tried to reinvent itself. If it could no longer dominate the seas, it would rule through culture and spectacle. Palaces grew even grander, theaters flourished, and Venice transformed into the playground of Europe's elite. Carnivals became legendary, a dizzying escape from reality, where masks hid class, scandal, and sin. But beneath the gold leaf and silk, the city was slowly bleeding. By the late 16th century, Venice was no longer the empire it once was. It remained dazzling, yes, but fragile, a city clinging to memories of power while the world changed around it. The lagoon still whispered of past glory, but the tides of history had turned. By the dawn of the 18th century, Venice was a shadow of its former self. The palaces along the Grand Canal still shimmered beneath the Adriatic sun. Gondolas still drifted between marble bridges, and masked revelers still filled the alleys during carnival nights. Outwardly, the city sparkled, but behind the facades, the Serenissima was dying. The once feared Venetian navy had become a memory. Trade routes, once the veins through which gold and spices flowed, had shifted permanently to the Atlantic. Portugal, Spain, England, and the Dutch Republic now controlled the oceans. Venice, built on commerce, was stranded in a world it no longer ruled. Desperate to remain relevant, the Venetian Senate turned inward. Wealth was poured into art, theater, and decadence. The city became a living stage, a place where Europe's elite came to indulge in masked intrigue and forbidden pleasures. Yet, the very splendor that drew travelers from across the continent only concealed the slow decay. Venetian merchants grew poorer. The arsenale fell silent, and whispers of corruption reached every corner of the lagoon. By the late 18th century, a new storm was rising. In 1796, Napoleon Bonaparte marched into northern Italy, his armies unstoppable. Venice, neutral for centuries, suddenly found itself caught between France and Austria, two giants pulling Europe apart. The Venetian Senate hesitated, hoping diplomacy would save them, but Napoleon had other plans. In 1797, after a brief but brutal campaign, Napoleon forced Venice to surrender without a single cannon fired in defense of the lagoon. The Treaty of Campo Formio handed the city, once the richest and most powerful maritime republic in the world, to Austria. After over 1,100 years of independence, the Venetian Republic ceased to exist. The end came not with fire and blood, but with silence. The proud lion of St. Mark, the ancient symbol of Venice, was lowered from its mast. The Great Council, which had ruled for centuries, dissolved forever. The echoes of chants and merchant calls that once defined the city faded beneath the heavy weight of history. And yet, Venice did not die. It transformed. No longer an empire, it became a legend. Artists, poets, and dreamers flocked to the lagoon, captivated by its haunted beauty. Byron, Goethe, and Turner wrote of its crumbling splendor, painting it as a place suspended between life and memory. Today, when gondolas drift through silent canals beneath the rising sun, the waters still whisper of power, betrayal, and forgotten glory. The Venetian Republic may have fallen, but its myth endures. A reminder that even the mightiest empires can sink beneath the tides of time.